G'day Internet. Here marks the beginning of a new series on the Giles Vesey YouTube channel where we are going to repair my mazdaspeed 3. What's wrong with it? I blew the engine up. So earlier this year I went to a drag strip with this car. It was my second time ever going to a drag strip, and the first time I also took this car. The first time I went, I really suck at front wheel drive drag racing, but that's kind of part of the fun, is getting to launch your car and trying to get better at controlling the loss of traction. So anyway, second time I took it to the drag strip earlier this year, I drove it to the drag strip, which was 3.5 hours away, and on the very first run of the event that I did, I blew it up. So I will include the footage. I never took a data log of this, which I'm kicking myself over, but I do have video of the event. So let's watch that right now. So basically I went into second way too fast and lost traction like crazy, or maybe the clutch was slipping, it's hard to tell, but I'm pretty sure it was the tires. And then I kept going down the strip, and in third and fourth gear you can kind of hear it going gah, 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 gah. So I think the damage was done by that point. So what damage are you talking about, Giles? This damage. Check that out. That's pretty impressive, is it not? This was piston number 2. So here's what I think happened. I'm not entirely sure what happened, but I'm going to give you my best understanding. So it overboosted. This car is only supposed to make 26 pounds of boost, and it hit 30. I've never in my life seen it hit 30. It's been running the same setup on methanol for about half a year, or maybe a year, and had no problems. It was running 26 pounds of boost. It was nice and quick, loved it. But for some reason on this run, 3 hours from home, it decided to hit 30. And here's what I think happened. Slightly bent the rod by just going a little bit over how much it's supposed to boost. See, it's just a little bent. I think that was the first thing that happened. Then, the piston was no longer sitting straight anymore. It was probably cocked off to the side a little bit. And then it just wasn't sealing correctly anymore. It was probably scraping against the side. And I continued driving it down the strip. Didn't know that this happened, obviously, because I was just, I was in the middle of a run, and it seemed to be running fine. The only sign that anything was off is the fact that it hesitated in third and fourth. It went, and after the run, there was a shitload of smoke coming out the back of it. So what I think happened is that first off, this bent a little bit, then this wasn't sitting in there properly anymore. Then I continued driving it, and the gases were just rushing right past the side of the piston that was probably scraping against the side of the bore, and it melted this incredibly impressive hole in the piston. That is very, very melted. Look, it melted the rings, which are made out of hardened steel. Crazy. So, we have the engine taken out of this right now. I did that a couple months ago. Let's go take a look at the engine block. Here's the engine block out of the car. And here's what it did to the cylinder wall. I didn't exactly care about rust for obvious reasons. This is dicked. That is melted through the factory sleeve. So the only hope for this engine block ever running again is if I install aftermarket sleeves in it, which are a relatively expensive thing, probably like 600 Canadian for the sleeves, and then to get them installed at a machine shop, more money. So originally that was my idea, is I was going to use the original block and repair it. But when I actually got this out of the car and started looking at it, I started thinking, I have another block that could just require a rehone in one of my other cars. So we took the engine out of the black mazdaspeed 6, that was just very tired, but not blown up. It was burning a lot of oil, but it was not blown up. And here's that. So that was a lot of work, completely tearing a mazdaspeed engine out of a mazdaspeed and then doing it again immediately. But it feels good to use the stuff that I have and save a little bit of money. So here's the block out of the black speed 6. There's nothing wrong with any of these apart from that right there. That's interesting. So this let me take a step back. So with the Mazdaspeeds, there's two sizes of pistons that you can run. You can run stock, which is 87.5 millimeters, and then there's an overboard size, which is 88 millimeters. So you can take this to a machine shop and have them bore it half a millimeter over. So that essentially gives this block a brand new life. So you purchase pistons that are that 88 millimeter overboard size. You take this to a machine shop, you get them to overbore it. I'm going to get the machine shop to do a couple other things as well, such as skimming this to make it nice and flat, and also so I don't have to clean the gasket material. That will all just be nice and perfect, and I won't have to worry about it. So that is in fact the plan. We are going to take the bottom end from the Speed 6, and we're going to build it. We're going to do forged internals. Here's the parts pile right here. Here are my pistones. Look at that. Look at that. This is a Mahle Power Pack 4032 aluminum 88 millimeter bore piston. I've got a set of 4 of them here with all the wrist pins and the rings and everything that I need apart from the rods. I got Manly H-Tough rods, which should be good for around 500 600 horsepower. So what's the exciting thing here, Giles? How much horsepower are we going to aim for in the new build? So we are going to be aiming for between 400 and 450 at the wheels. I want to see that on a dyno after I build this thing, and then I will be very happy. What this was making prior to this rebuild was, I'm not exactly sure, but I would estimate to be like 330 wheel, 350 wheel maybe. So we are bumping it up again. And this time I'm going to have forged pistons and rods. So hopefully I will have an overbuilt bottom end versus a barely built enough bottom end for the setup that I'm running. 26 pounds on a stock block is just about, it's as far as you can go. So you are flying pretty close to the sun, and unfortunately we flew directly into the sun whenever it boosted to 30 pounds. So, oh yeah, I want to talk about this really quick. Theaterable. Alright, so this is my Cork Sport CST4. This is the turbo that was on it, and the turbo that's going to continue to be on it. I did a little bit of once-over on this, cleaned up a bunch of the hardware. I replaced all of the studs with ones that aren't screwed up because previously I was really lazy when I installed this, and all of these studs were really, really rusted in there because I just drove them through and didn't care. Well, this time I cared. I drove a tap through there, cleaned up the threads, got new studs. The ones on top are stainless steel. And yeah, this should just be a lot nicer to work with moving forwards, because these studs being all screwed up all the time really annoyed me. You needed the breaker bar to work on any of these at all, and now you don't. So that's great. Also clean these up on the belt sander. Is that the super duper perfect way to do it? No. But is it going to be good enough? Yes. See, it's nice and flat. Same thing with over there. It was very crusty. You can see where there's still a little bit of pitting left over. Anyway, that's not the point of me bringing this turbo out to show you. The point of me bringing this turbo out is to talk about the fact that after I blew up the car, I noticed that this was missing. This is a vacuum cap that goes on one of the ports that's on the wastegate actuator. The wastegate is the thing that vents excess boost pressure and makes your car make 26 pounds instead of 30. So I don't know enough about how this works exactly to say that this caused my engine to blow up, but it's certainly suspicious. In one of my trains of thought, if this is missing, this will have no control over this, and it should just ride on spring pressure. So that should have made it boost to like 10 to 15 pounds, just the pressure of the spring that's in here. Because what the ECU is doing through the boost controller is it's pushing this down harder to continue making more boost. It tells the turbo to vent less pressure by pushing this plunger down. So if this was missing, I would think that it would just ride on spring pressure and underboost. But, and another train of thought that I'm having is if this was missing, maybe this would realize, oh, we have really crappy control over the boost, and maybe it would overshoot and undershoot and overshoot and undershoot because there's a massive leak right here. Similar to how if you have a vacuum leak in your car, it's gonna hunt. I wish I had the data log to know that for sure, but I don't. But it's certainly suspicious that this was missing. So this is a 25-cent part that potentially grenaded my entire engine. This caused the wastegate actuator and the ECU to get confused, have crappy control over the wastegate. Wastegate got closed too hard for too long, made 30 pounds, bent the rod, cocked the piston, melted the piston, and made me sad. So I had to get the car trailered back home. Shout out to my Aunt Amy for renting a U-Haul trailer and driving 3.5 hours each way to come pick my dumbass up. So that is partially why I bought the Ford Ranger, which I have not talked about on the channel at all. So I got myself a truck finally, and I fully plan on using that to tow the Speed 3 to the drag strip next year whenever we fix it. Because you bet your ass we're going to fix it. So I think that's everything I wanted to talk about with the turbo. This 25-cent part is potentially why I'm spending thousands of dollars fixing this up. However, this engine setup was 14 years old. The car is from 2010, so it kind of needed it regardless. Other things to talk about. As you move into my workshop here, it's just overflowing with Speed 3 bits. There's the bumper, there's my box of engine stuff, there's random stuff. Here's engine parts and bags, here's the headlights. Here's the turbo inlet pipe and the starter, and, you know, just the car is taking up all the space in my house right now. Here's the cylinder head. So with all that damage and the piston looking as bad as it did, the cylinder head is actually okay. The worst thing that happened is this tiny little nick right there that doesn't even matter. So I'm going to be getting this skimmed by the machine shop. So even if that is sticking up a tiny bit, it's not going to be after we do that. So cylinder head is looking good. I'm doing lapping on this, and I've learned some things about lapping that I want to talk about really quick. Because I made a little bit of a mistake, and I kind of screwed something up, so maybe it's worth talking about. Okay, I don't want to ramble about this too much, but basically I learned that when you're lapping valves, don't try and use lapping to get past a significant amount of pitting on either the valve seat or the valve itself. So, which one of these is pitted pretty bad? I've been screwing around a bunch with these. This one is completely untouched, so if it has pitting, oh, you're not going to be able to see this worth a shit. There we go. So if it's got pitting like that, you should probably not try and fix that by lapping. So the reason you don't want to lap the shit out of a valve against the seat in order to get past the pitting is because if you do that, you're probably going to wear the contact area past what the spec is. And what happens when you go over spec, I don't know, but spec exists for a reason. And basically all of these exhaust valves, I'm only touching the exhaust valves, the intake valves look totally fine, but some of the exhaust valves have a little bit of pitting on them. So I want to lap them. So what is my goal here? What am I trying to achieve? I just want to make the surfaces against one another and clean up any tiny little bits of pitting or surface irregularities that have developed over the last 200,000 kilometers of this running, because that's what it has on it. So here is an example of one that I have done well. I'm happy with this one. I lapped that against its corresponding valve, and it looks all nice and clean and good. But on the first one that I did, I went way too far. I did two things wrong. I went way too far and did it for way too long, and I also used the drill. So you can have success using the drill to do lapping, but not the way that I did it. I held it in one spot for way too long, and what happened is it grooved it. So there, I think you can, yeah. You can see that it is grooved. Would that work? I don't know, but I'm not risking it. So the grooves happen whenever you use the lapping compound and you don't change directions enough. If you just keep going in a circle and a circle and a circle and a circle, you'll get big pieces of grit that just chill in one spot, and they will wear down a ring like that, and that is not conducive to sealing properly. So I grooved it, and then I went, oh shit, let's see if I can clean that up. And then I lapped it more, and I made it a little bit better, but it's still there. And now this contact area is huge, and it's way past spec, and I went, oh shit, okay. I've accepted that I've screwed up this valve seat, and I'm gonna get the machine shop to install and cut another one. But thankfully had my learning experience on one seat. Even though I've done this before, I've never had grooves get in it like that before. So anyway, don't use a drill, don't lap too much. On some of these, I'm treating these on a case-by-case basis. So some of the valves are a lot more pitted than others. So some of these, like this one goes in, not that one, this one. And just with a little bit of hand lapping, so I'm not using the drill at all anymore. What you want to do is, don't watch my videos for advice on lapping, because I don't know what I'm talking about, but you want to go a quarter of a turn to, or down to an eighth of a turn. You just want to go and constantly change direction and do it by hand. Don't use the drill. Really light pressure, and every 20 times you do that, lift it, move it a quarter of a turn to change its orientation, and tap it a couple times to bring in the new compound. If you've never lapped valves before, you're probably going to have no idea what I just said. But if you have lap valves, then you'll know what I'm talking about. So drill, bad, change directions a lot, occasionally change the orientation of the valve versus your hand. And if you do that, you will get good results and not crappy results. Also, if you watched my RX-7 engine build, I kinda can't help but restore some of this stuff. So some of these things were just so corroded from being on the road for 14 years. This is the high-pressure fuel pump cam housing, I guess you'd call it. I sandblasted this and painted it. It looks delicious, and this is something that you can see from the engine bay. Also, this thing was disgusting. This thing was so corroded and just nasty. It felt really good to sandblast this and clean up the sealing surfaces with some sandpaper. And yeah, I feel a lot better putting this back on the car than I would have if I just left it. Probably would have leaked from every orifice that it had. Also, crusty things that we have cleaned up. Check out this valve cover. This valve cover was very disgusting and very corroded. It barely fit into my dad's sandblasting cabinet, but it did, and I painted it with some paint that I got at a closing sale of a local engine shop, and this was $5 for a can. So far, I've used this one can to do those two things I just showed you and this, so I'm getting my money's worth, I think. Also, in one of the RX-7 resto videos, I said I was going to talk about hot bluing, and I never did. So let's talk about hot bluing, because I'm doing it on all of the bolts for this too. I really love to make this take longer, but also I want to have a clean result by the time I'm done. I want this engine to be borderline show car status. So, what is hot bluing? First of all, let me talk about how here's my full process for restoring these screws, right? So, they come out of the engine, they're all greasy and dirty. Take those, put them in some degreaser, optionally in the ultrasonic cleaner, and get all of the grease and dirt off of them. Then, take them and put them in the evaporust in the ultrasonic cleaner. It will remove the rust like so. Then, wash them off with water to get rid of the evaporust layer that goes onto stuff when you evaporust it. Rinse them off, then heat them up with the torch until it is just a step below red hot. So it'll go blue and then kind of like a whitish color. That white is where you want to stop, but I like to get it red hot, just barely, and then let it cool down a bit so I know it's exactly in the right spot. And then you drop it in some canola oil. So here's stuff that I have hot blued. You can see where, like on that big long guy, you can see where it was hot enough at the head of the bolt, and the rest of it I didn't really care to heat up enough. So what that does, I don't know the science behind it, but sort of I do. the pores of the metal open up when you get it that hot, and it starts oxidizing and stuff, and you know, stuff from the air starts getting trapped into the little pores, and you heat it up like that, and then you immediately drop it in canola oil, and it takes the oil and it gets absorbed into the pores of the metal, I think. I don't know. All I know is that it's really easy to degrease, evapor-rust, and then hot blue hardware. And why do you hot blue it? It gives you a little bit of rust protection. It's not on the same level as zinc plating or anything like that, but it's not bad. Especially if you leave it soaked in canola oil whenever you install it on the car. Like, I don't try and clean all the canola oil off when I install it, so that it's at least wet for the first little bit of its life. In my experience, everything that I've done this to on the RX-7 has been holding up pretty well, unless it's in like a really particularly nasty area. So this makes everything look nice, it's easy to put back together, and you have a bit of corrosion protection. It is a bit of work, but it's worth it in my eyes. Okay, I think this is the last thing that I want to talk about, because it's kind of cool. We're doing some changes to some of our components that bolt onto the engine. Here is a Ford Focus ST intake manifold. This is a very nice flowing. It is an so here's the problem with the stock intake manifold. It has very uneven flow. It gives really uneven amounts of air to certain pistons versus other pistons. So you'll have one running lean while others are running rich. It's just not great. And also, it doesn't flow very nicely. So this intake manifold is very inexpensive, less than 200 Canadian bucks, and it's plastic. Nothing wrong with that necessarily. And this has been a proven thing to run on mazdaspeeds to get a really nice flowing intake mani. But you need to buy an adapter kit to make it work with the mazdaspeeds. So what's funny is that adapter kit is like 500 Canadian, but this is like 150 Canadian. So it's a really expensive kit to run a really cheap, really well-designed intake manifold. So that's cool. What makes this a little bit of work is the fact that the throttle body now points straight down. If this was the stock manifold, this would go like that. So the throttle body would actually be going this way instead of this way. So that means we have to do a little bit of custom piping work that I'm not going to be able to work on until things are bolted into the car. And using this intake manifold also means that I have to do a front mount intercooler instead of the top mount intercooler that is currently on it, because reasons. So a front mount intercooler is something I wasn't planning on doing originally, but whatever. It'll look cool, it'll work well, it doesn't get heat soaked like the top mount intercooler does. And, you know, better boosted performance. But it does give me a bit of a project to do. This is a Treadstone TR8 core. And I believe I'm going to have to cut into the crash bar on my car. That's the big red horizontal front crash bar bumper thing you see on it. I'm going to have to cut into that a little bit to mount this where I want to mount it. I've also ordered the Basin R open mouth grill so that this thing can breathe properly, so that's another expensive and fun thing. And what really makes this fun is that none of the off-the-shelf front mount intercooler piping kits will work for my setup, because now the throttle body is pointing down instead of to the side, which all of the off-the-shelf kits assume. So we're going to be figuring this out custom, which is kind of something that I enjoy. But it sort of annoys me I can't even plan it out or think about it until the engine is in the car. So next week, and I think Tuesday, in like a couple days, I'm taking this to the machine shop, which is about 2 hours away. Unfortunately, there's no machine shops in PEI, in my province. So I gotta do a bit of a road trip, both to drop it off and pick it up. So that is pretty much where we're at with the mazdaspeed revival. So if you made it this far into the vid, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, where hopefully this thing will be machined and we can start actually rebuilding stuff. See you next time.